Okay, it's working, yeah. Good. Good evening, and I welcome all of you to the Salt Lake City Public Library. My name is Sheikh Safiullah Safi, and I am a manager here at the City Library. Tonight, it is my great honor to welcome you all to the first lecture in our Pathways to Peace lecture series entitled Islam and Human Rights, How Will the Arab Spring Bring Peace to the Middle East? Presented by Professor Tariq Ramadan of Oxford University. Allow me to introduce Ms. Deb Sawyer, the mastermind behind this lecture series, who will then introduce Dr. Tariq Ramadan. Ms. Sawyer earned her MS degree in physics from the University of Utah. She is the president of the Gandhi Alliance for Peace and is actively involved with the Utah campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. Ms. Sawyer is a multiple award-winning activist who has traveled to war-torn nations with peacekeeping operations such as Witness for Peace and Global Exchange. Ms. Sawyer helped create the Barbara Tanner Fellowship with the Lowell Bennion Center at the University of Utah. Along with her parents, Norman and Barbara Tanner, Ms. Sawyer created the Tanner Center for Nonviolent Human Rights Advocacy at the University of Utah. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Ms. Deb Sawyer.
Thank you, Safi, and I want to thank everyone for coming. I also want to thank our sponsors, especially the City Library, the Friends of the City Library, the Telemachus Foundation, the University of Utah Tanner Human Rights Center, and the Marriott Library, and Westminster College. Other sponsors are the Gandhi Alliance for Peace, Peaceful Uprising, the Salt Lake Community College School of Humanities and Social Sciences, the U of U Middle East Center and Religious Studies Program, Utah Valley University Peace and Justice Studies, Utahns for a Just Peace in the Holy Land, and Wasatch Coalition for Peace and Justice. After the speech, we will have a 20-minute Q&A, which will be followed by a reception and a book signing. Tomorrow at the University of Utah, at noon, Professor Ramadan will speak at the Gould Auditorium in the Marriott Library. His talk will be The Need of Ethics When Dealing with an Islamic Legal System, Bioethics, Environment, Gender. Professor Ramadan's writing certainly reflects a keen awareness that the challenges facing any nation, whether it be Egypt, the United States, or China, cross national boundaries. No nation can adequately address them alone. I am reminded of an Indian village saying that I associate with Mahatma Gandhi. We are all blind men touching an elephant, thinking we have the truth. One man touches a leg and thinks the elephant is a tree. Another man touches the trunk and says the elephant is a serpent. We need each other. If we can listen to one another with respect, compassion, courage, and humility, the blinders and lens that we wear mostly unconsciously and that distort our vision and understanding of the world can begin to fall off. As Americans, we do well by listening to Professor Ramadan. Tariq Ramadan is a professor of contemporary Islamic studies at Oxford University. He is visiting professor at the Faculty of Islamic Studies, Qatar, and the University of Malaysia, senior research fellow at Doshisha University in Kyoto, Japan, and director of the Research Center of Islamic Legislation and Ethics in Doha, Qatar. He holds an MA in philosophy and French literature and PhD in Arabic and Islamic studies from the University of Geneva. In Cairo, Egypt, he received one-on-one intensive training in classic Islamic scholarship from Al-Azhar University scholars. Through his writings and lectures, Professor Ramadan has contributed to the debate of the issues of Muslims in the West and Islamic revival in the Muslim world. He is active at academic and grassroots levels, lecturing extensively throughout the world on theology, ethics, social justice, ecology, and interfaith, as well as intercultural dialogue. He is president of the European think tank, European Muslim Network in Brussels. He writes extensively. His latest book is Islam and the Arab Awakening. You're welcome to visit his website at tariqramadan.com. I am now honored to turn the time over to Professor Ramadan.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this invitation. Deb Sawyer and Dr. Sheikh Safiullah, I'm very happy to be here. I know that they were working together and they have been very instrumental in bringing me here. It has been a long time, the last 2 years, trying to organize this visit, and then with this series of lecture, it was the right time to come and being the first in this series, and I'm happy to be here. This is my first visit in the Salt Lake City, and I'm discovering, and it's a great pleasure. Thank you for being here, and what I'm trying to, I will try to do with this topic is to try to not only talk about the ideal values and speaking about the human rights in which we have to think about them, promote them, and hoping that something will happen in the Middle East, but also starting with a more realistic approach towards what is happening. My take on all the principles that we are promoting, sitting here in this room and thinking about human rights, it's not to speak about the ideals and to hope that one day they will be implemented. It's to understand that as human beings, as citizens, and for you mainly as American citizens or residents in the United States, our understanding and coming to a lecture on the Middle East is not only to understand or to try to get a sense of the values that are promoted here or there or the differences, is in fact in which way as human beings, as people who might have faith, might be Christians or Muslims or Jews or Buddhists, it's in which way we understand the complexity of the real in order to be active within the real to make it possible to reach and to achieve our principles. So I'm not here to speak about a reality which is not ours. My point is to come back to every one of us in this room to understand if we are serious about human rights, we have to be very, very serious about facts, complexity, and commitment towards it. So I'm coming here to share with you a sense of commitment and not only something which is a passive look at the world, but an active understanding of the dynamics within the world, and especially this evening about the Middle East. So let me start with an introduction, and we start with the complexity of the whole things, and the first complex issue when it comes to the Middle East and what is happening, and it was in the title of my lecture, is Arab Spring. Are we witnessing an Arab Spring of revolutions in the Middle East today, and is this the right words that we have to use? And when I started from the very beginning, I wrote the book Islam and the Arab Awakening, and what I was trying to do is two things. First, to come with trying to be very close to the events and try to understand. So I was writing every week, every 2 weeks, a paper about the different steps, and at the same time coming with the big questions, the fundamental questions that we have to ask when it comes to what is happening. And very quickly I heard people saying, oh, it's the Arab Spring, people are demonstrating, and we were buying this as if it was as simple as that. I never used the concept of revolutions, and I never used the concept of spring. I used the concept of awakening, saying from the very beginning, revolutions are not achieved, and even I cannot see the signs of true revolution over there. And second, spring, in the way it happened first in Tunisia and then in Egypt, to speak about the spring and was too quickly to use the terminology that was used in Eastern Europe with Serbia, and if you remember, this is where we were talking about the European Spring and all these words that we were using, and to export this into the Middle East, while the Middle East is much more complex as to the internal dynamics that what was happening in Europe. And I took from the very beginning something which was, for me, not only an intellectual duty, but also a necessity when it comes to analyze what was happening and hoping to change what was the dynamic within a very short period of time, because it happened very quickly. And I kept on repeating, my intellectual position on this is to be cautiously optimistic. And cautiously optimistic is not to buy the rhetoric of the people, but it's not only to think about the fact, because I got criticized on both sides, so to speak. For some in the Middle East, they were saying, oh no, you have to trust the people, they wanted to liberate themselves, so we have to be on their side, which is my case. Of course, I am on the side of the people liberating themselves from dictatorship. But at the same time, I was trying not to be naive on what are the terms of the equation when it comes to the Middle East. Because it's very, just a position of principle. How come the Western countries who are supporting the dictators for so many years were so quick to celebrate the liberation by the people? How come? For example, Ben Ali wouldn't have lasted almost 3 decades without the support of the West. He was close to the French government, close to the American administration, and then all of a sudden he just was removed, and in the West we were celebrating the new democracy. So how have you been waiting so long to support the democratic will of the people? Freedom there. Exactly the same in Egypt. And then you can add to all the countries. And how come we celebrate the Arab Spring when the petromonarchies are not so democratic, but we still deal with them and we forget to talk about them? So much the case that all the media were covering in a very, very intense way what was happening in Egypt, what was happening in Tunisia, and silent about the repression in Bahrain and in Saudi Arabia. At the beginning, this happened. Why? Why? Is it as simple as that? It's not. So we need to have something which is a more complex understanding. And recently, when I was on Charlie Rose, he was telling me No, you have to, the American administration, they are celebrating democracy and they want democracy, and this is why they were supporting what was happening in Tunisia and Egypt. Say yes, but it's not always the case. Say no, the American administration is for democracy. Say, so why don't they support the resistance in Saudi Arabia and the call for democracy there? And he smiled and he said, it's a case per case. That's exactly my point. Case per case, when you celebrate democracy, it's a problem. You are for democracy or you are not, but you cannot play with the democratic values when it suits you. You can't. So what I want you to understand at the beginning is it's complex, it's difficult, it's not something that we have to simplify, and the first is the terminology. What is clear today, and this is good and positive, and this is why I am still optimistic, is that something happened in the mindsets of the people in the Arab world. For 30 years, 40 years, the perception was we are not going to get rid of the dictators. This is not possible. They were not changing. It was changing in Africa, changing in South East Asia. It was changing in South America and Latin America. But in the Middle East, nothing. The Arab countries were under the dictatorships for so long, and then it's possible. So this is not a political revolution yet, but it's already an intellectual revolution. This awakening is the people taking to the street and saying, we want to get rid of the dictator. And this is something which is positive. So it might last much more than 2 years, as we are seeing now. It's difficult. It's going to be a long process, but at least something happened in the mindset of the Arabs that something could be done against the dictator in a non-violent way. Remember this guy in Yemen? He was taken to the street and he went and he said, I'm not going to take any weapon. I'd say the military were shooting at them and say, we are going next Friday, and if they shoot, we are not going to react. Our power will be the number. That's it. And you want to shoot, you shoot, but we are going to. And I think that this is something which is completely new in our understanding from here of the Middle East, which is non-violent mass demonstrations. And they succeeded. Now, without being naive, we need to have a big picture of what was happening. Now, the second point which was important is to come to the values, and this is why the connection to human rights is also important. Why was it a success in Tunisia at the beginning and in Egypt? Because, in fact, it was based beyond all political affiliations on values and a specific target. If you read someone who was very instrumental, and I'm talking about him in the book because very often he's unknown by all the analysts that are dealing with the Middle East, because he was very much working first in Europe and then he trained cyber dissidents in the Middle East. Srdja Popovic is the one who was behind the peaceful, non-violent revolution in Serbia. He trained the people. And he had something which is 50 points of a plan how to mobilize the people against the dictators. And he trained some of the people in Tunisia, in Egypt, and all this. And we had a TV program, a discussion, and he acknowledged that he was training the people. What he was saying is, first, you need a clear slogan that you are targeting the dictator and no one else. Remember in Tunisia, in Egypt, they were not talking about America, they were not talking about Europe, they were not talking about Israel, they were talking about Ben Ali, dégage, get out of here. Mubarak, the people want you to leave the country. It was very targeted. Positive message, which is beyond the political affiliation, uniting the forces against the dictator. We all agree that we don't want him. That's it. Don't talk about anything that can create disagreement and talk about this. Second was also something which has non-violence and discipline. Discipline means anyone who is trying to be violent, we should stop him, and it has to be massive. massive. So all this was very powerful, and this is why it succeeded, because it succeeded. It was powerful against. But the strength of this movement, now we see the problem. The strength of being united against is not enough when now you have to be united for a project. What after the dictator? What kind of project? Which is much more difficult than just to be against. It has to be a project, a vision. And this is what we see now. All the countries, with no exception, Tunisia, Egypt, Yemen, Libya, Syria now, they are all going through a crisis and stability and are unsettled. This is the reality of it now. So the strengths before become the weakness after. If you don't have a political vision, if you don't have a project, if you don't know how to deal with this unity against, to make it a potential front for. And you can see now that this could be a problem. All what they were asking for were values that we all cherish. We all cherish here. They were talking about freedom. So to Mubarak and Ben Ali and Bashar al-Assad now and the Yemeni government, they were saying freedom is what we want. We want you to respect our dignity, and we want justice, and we want our being to be respected. So it was all about respect, justice, dignity, and freedom. Remember at the beginning, which was quite interesting, here in the United States of America, but also in Europe, in the Western media, it's as if, oh, look at these people. They take to the street and now they are celebrating the same values as ours. And for a moment, we looked at them as, oh, those who we thought were the other are in fact like us. They want the same values as us. And at the moment where we think, or we thought at that point that they were like us, we forgot that yes, they are like us, but they are still Muslims in majority. And this is the point. The point is that all the rhetoric that we had, and especially after September 11, portraying the Muslims as the other. And you heard about this movie. You heard the movie recently about catching Osama bin Laden, which created a controversy about the fact that they were saying that we are normalizing torture, which, by the way, it's not new. This is the sad side. This is the sad side of the American recent history, to normalize torture, to get information. And if you, as citizens in this country, you are true citizens and true to your value, at least you should never accept any government which can normalize torture as a way to get information. But and we might also go very far on this, because sometimes when I'm saying this, we think about torture as only torture in physical terms. You have in this country people, they don't know why they are in jail, and for 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, 4 years they have been in jail, in solitary confinement, alone. You know what the psychologists are saying? After 2 weeks alone, with no light, your mind starts to lose its way. 4 years to transform people into crazy people. And you talk about human rights? This is psychological torture. And it has to be called the way it is, torture. And it's not acceptable. First, they have to be judged. And second, no way to put people like this in solitary confinement for years. That's not normal. It's me. You just tell me I can. If you tell me I can. I see you. Is that better? It's my way of talking. When I am passionate, I lower my voice. That's the way to try to be, to master. Anyway, that's not acceptable. What I wanted to say here is Since September the 11th, it's as if, and in this movie that I was talking about torture because it came from this movie, the big controversy was normalizing torture. But if you look and you watch this movie in a very deep way, you will see something which is very deep. In fact, not the terrorists, but the Muslims are portrayed within the movie as the other. There is an us, the Americans, and the Muslims are the other. And this is a problem. And if you look at the first covering media of what was happening in the Middle East is, look, they are asking for justice, dignity, and freedom. They are like us, and for a while we forgot that they were Muslims. It's as if there is our values that they were sharing for a while, which in fact, the Middle East today is people, and the great majority of the people are Muslims. Not only you have Christians and Coptic in Egypt who are together celebrating the victory against Mubarak at the beginning. This was important. And you have agnostic and atheists, and you have Jews. And it's important here to get it right. The beginning of the whole process where people, Muslims in majority, asking for dignity, freedom, and justice. And we have to keep this in mind. Why? Because willing it or not, if you want to speak about human rights and if you want to speak about peace in the Middle East, Islam is going to be part of the equation. Willing it or not, we need to understand that Islam is somewhere. So to ask the people, become like us and be less Muslim to be more Democrats, it's silly. This is intellectual colonization. It's arrogance. It's patronizing. We have the values, follow the path. If this was the truth, we should be seeing this. You have been, and for the people in the Middle East, this is a rhetoric that has no consistency. You can't pretend that you were the Democrats where for so long you supported the dictators. So the only thing that we all have to share here is intellectual humility. We are trying our best. But to patronize about our values against versus your actions, and this sometimes is the same with Muslims and Arabs. Sometimes they are talking about the states by saying, oh, the states are not, this is what they are doing, and they are comparing our values against your actions. This is not a dialogue. This is not fair. You cannot speak about the Islamic values versus the American actions. And you cannot speak about the Western values against the Arab actions. We compare the like with the like. It's an intellectual attitude which is the starting point of understanding what is happening. Now, having said that, the first movement here was about these values that they were celebrating, and this is what they wanted. They wanted this freedom, and this is the way it started. And they wanted to liberate the country. Now, this is what happened, and they were able to get rid of the dictators, at least in Egypt and in Tunisia. And then it's still very, very unclear what is going to happen in Syria. It's a very sad story. The word is passive, where every day we have more than 170 people being killed. Every day. Every day. And 1 million refugees outside Syria. And it's as if we're unable to do anything. The situation in Libya is politically unsettled, and the situation in Yemen is problematic and very fragile in Jordan, and still repression in Bahrain. If you look at the whole region, it's unsettled, and no one can say now what is going to happen. But in order to hope, in order to be to have the right to hope that something is going to happen positively, we need to look at the situation the way it is now and what are the main challenges. And this will be the two parts of my talk now, with all the backdrop of what I want to say. The first part was about the backdrop, what we should get as something which is our understanding of the situation. And making it clear that at the end of the day, the Muslim citizens, the Coptic citizens, and the Arab citizens, whatever is their religious affiliation or with no affiliations, they are cherishing the same values and they want the same thing as us. Let us start with this as a position of principle. They are not asking for something else as to the values that they are promoting. So, what is the situation and in which way we have to look at it now? And this is what I wanted to say, and I took a long time in the book to explain this. In fact, we have been misled. We have been misled from the very beginning because in our discussion on what is happening in the Middle East, we look at the situation as if it's only a situation that we have to analyze in political terms. If the people in the street are taking to the street, it's because they want freedom. This is what I said. But now the other actors are not only dealing with the political system. One of the most important questions in the Middle East today, it's not the political structures, it's the economic stability and the geostrategy in the region. And what I'm telling you is, how come you have American and West and European countries supporting the dictators, all of a sudden they were supporting the demonstrations against the dictators. So they support the dictators and they support all the trends against the dictator. How come? Why? How? It's not logic. And how come, for example, you heard this? George W. Bush in 2003 lied to the world, and he sent Colin Powell to say weapon of mass destruction. All these were lies, and we know that this was a construction. Nothing happened, and the relations with Al-Qaeda, all this was wrong. But he said something at the very beginning of this endeavor when he said, now we start with Iraq, but we are going to democratize the Middle East. And he meant it. And in fact, since 2003, we know that some institutions here, and you will have people coming here to talk from the Albert Einstein Institute, Freedom House, and others, they started training cyber dissidents in the Middle East. In 2003, they were trained to get a better way of using Facebook, Twitter, and all this. All these are facts, and they were known. It's so much the case that even in 2008, the American ambassador in Cairo is already speaking about a group of people who want to throw away and to get rid of the dictator before the next election in 2011. This was said in 2008. So the idea that this was not known and it came all of a sudden is wrong. It was known. The question is, why the American administration and European countries were welcoming anything which has to do with democratization within the Middle East? It's not because of democracy. It's not because we celebrate democracy. As I told you, if this was the case, the first country to start with were the petromonarchies, to liberate the people. It's not this. In fact, it's because we haven't studied enough what happened over the last 15 years in the region, which in fact, in geostrategic terms and economic terms, it's in fact the true revolution. In less than 7 years, the Chinese presence in economic terms has multiplied by 8. It means that China is everywhere now in the Middle East. And as you know, what your economy now has as a relationship with the Chinese investment in the United States, you know how much the American economy is fragile. And in the Middle East, the Chinese and what we call the BRICS country, Brazil, Russia, India, China, add to these Latin American countries, add to this South Africa, add to this Malaysia, they are new actors. And plus, recently, Turkey. Turkey, over the last 5 years, opened not less than 40 embassies in Africa and started to deal with China and India in a new way and in the Middle East. Meaning that the supremacy in geostrategic terms and in economic terms over the Middle East was challenged by new actors. And the reality of the new actors is that they don't care about the political, the Chinese are not asking you respect human rights. The Asian capitalism is not about democracy. The Asian capitalism is about efficiency, whatever is your political system. And they are ready to deal with anyone as long as the market is open. And in fact, look at what happened over the last 2 years. Over the last 2 years, all the countries are now unsettled in political terms. But the economy now are assisted economy. And who is now helping Tunisia? Who is now helping Egypt? More even. Who is now helping and taking over in Libya? Who are the countries now who are unsettled politically speaking, but open economically speaking? And they came back to the Bretton Woods institution. And who is controlling the Bretton Woods institution, the IMF and the World Bank, is the Western countries. You want 2 examples? The first is Iraq. Iraq now, 10 years later, what is happening in Iraq is you don't listen or you don't hear a lot about Iraq today. It's as if it's over. Every day you have people being killed. You have violence, clan, tribal, and tribes and tribal conflicts within, and sectarian positioning between Sunni and Shia. The political system is artificial and very fragile. It's very unsettled, and the country cannot take any decision. Iraq today, in political terms, is more democratic and deeply fragile. More democratic in artificial terms because the system is very much unsettled and you have people being protected. But what is good with Iraq is that you might think, and I wrote an article, if you go on the website, you will see that this is the first article that I published this week, 10 years later, saying it's strange that in fact this is a country where the political system is very fragile, while at the same time it's a country where the market is completely open for investment and the control of oil by the transnational Western corporations. This is what is happening now. So we should not be naive to look at the political side of the equation and not to look at the economic side. You want a second example? Libya. Libya, the situation is a catastrophe in terms of security, economy, political structure. It's the reality of it is that the people have weapons and they are killing each other, and you have tribes, and this is completely unsettled. But the oil and the resource and the transnational corporation are now working in Libya to rebuild the country and to take over and to control the oil resources. So very fragile political situation, very, very profitable economic investment. Add the same now in Egypt, in Tunisia, and in Yemen, and you will see that the situation is very complex. So what I'm saying here is the Arab Spring in political terms could be something else if we look at 2 different angles. And the 2 different angles is the economic side, the economic dimension, and something else that I wanted to refer to before coming to the second part and to come to my conclusion is the geostrategic side. Because the new actors in the region are challenging the geostrategic balance and equilibrium within the region. Once I was talking with one of the high-profile advisor at the State Department, and I was saying and talking about the Middle East, and he told me, you know what, he thought I was wrong, but he told me the United States of America and the Middle East, they have 3 main priorities. The first priority is security. The second is oil, and the third is Israel. These are the 3 priorities of the states. And if you look at what is happening, the oil resources with the petromonarchies are protected. The security is less protected if you have the new presence and the new technologies coming from India and from China. So this has to be controlled. And the last one about Israel, if China, India, Brazil, South Africa, Malaysia, and Turkey are entering and playing now the leading role in the region, it means a danger for Israel. Because none of these countries has the same relationship with Israel as the United States. It means the balance could shift. China has economic relationship with Israel, but they are not at all supporting the state of Israel the way the unilateral support is coming from the American government. So it means here that there is a challenge. And if you look at the Middle East, you can't today forget, we can speak about Egypt, Tunisia, and all these countries, but if you forget the central conflict between Israel and Palestine, that's not going to work. The stability of the region is based on this conflict. This has to be solved. How? So today, there is no solution. We talk about the peace process. Tell me where you think we are in the peace process. I only think a word, peace, but the process where it is. We don't see anything about the peace process today. So we have nice words, but not real policies on the ground today. And many of the people who are now visiting what is happening in Palestine and Israel are saying, you know what? The two-state solution is dead. Because it's colonized now and it's not going to work like this. The occupied territories and what is happening in Gaza and in the West Bank with the wall, which is against all the UN resolutions on all this, makes it impossible even to think about the two-state solution. So who is going to take the lead? Who is going to change? So I think that we need also to take the geostrategic dimension into account to understand that this push towards democratization could also be a way to fragilize, to get them all fragile, and then at the end, the economic situation and the geostrategic situation is more under control. Add to this, and I will stop here as to the analyzing where we are, because what I'm saying here is if we want to hope about, promoting human rights and peace in the region, all these dimensions should be known. You cannot just hope for democracy without talking about economic stability, geostrategic balance, and respect of the people, dealing with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Don't hope without being realistic, because hope without looking at the reality is counterproductive. At the end, if you hope without knowing what is happening on the ground, these hopes could just lead the people towards more disappointments as to what could happen in the future. And it happened with the people. They were very disappointed after the uprisings, because they thought, oh, we are going to make it. And look now, many people are very disappointed. They said, we didn't do this to get that, to get this situation. So I think that we need to have the whole picture. The last thing that I wanted to say, we speak about the spring, and still look what is happening in Tunisia, in Egypt, in Yemen, in Syria, in Jordan, in Bahrain, in Morocco, and all this. It's very nationalistic. Where is the spring in all this? It's as if the Tunisians are focused on Tunisia, the Egyptians on Egypt, and every country has its own logic. So it's completely scattered. A real Middle East is South-South relationship. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. The Tunisians are not dealing with the Moroccan, they are not dealing with Algeria, they are not dealing with Egypt, they are not dealing with... There is no South-South relationship. It's completely scattered. They all talk in bilateral relationship to the north. So where is the spring? It's just something which is completely... So to hope for a liberation where you are obsessed with nationalism and having nationalistic concerns, it's counterproductive. It's a contradiction in terms. And this is what is happening. So we also have to be very cautious about the whole dimension that it's a movement in the Middle East, much more, and I would say it's much more a scattered reality than a consistent dynamic. So you could say here that I'm quite pessimistic. I'm just dealing with the facts and trying to be realistic. Now, I think that there is hope and something happened that it's important. Third thing that we should promote, and it's important if we want to promote a positive future. If you look at what is happening in the Middle East, how much time do I have? Still 7 minutes or something like that? Am I within my time? Okay, thank you. If you listen to what is happening and coming from the Middle East, you have this kind of polarization between the secularists and the Islamists today. And after the elections, the Islamists took over because for two reasons, in fact, they were winning. The first is, in political terms, they were the people who were the more tortured and repressed by the previous dictators. So they had a historical credibility and a credential that they were resisting, and they paid the price. So this was something which was important. The second is that they were the most organized structures and organizations just after the uprisings. So they won, and winning it or not, they are popular, maybe less now with all the destabilized reality, but if you are Democrats, if you support the democratic values, you can't deny the fact that these trends and political Islam or Islamists, they have a voice within the country. On the other side, you have the secularists that are challenging, and they also have voices, and they also have support. The problem that we have in the Middle East, which is a real problem, is this type of polarization between secularists and Islamists, where the political vision is completely lost. We don't talk about the political vision, we talk about the justification of being where we are. So you listen to the secularist rhetoric, they are saying, we are the progressive, we are open, we promote the true values against or versus the Islamists. On the other side, you listen to the Islamists, they are saying to the secularists, you are westernized, you are colonized, you are not protecting our cultures and our religion, so we are the guardian of our reference. And both sides are justifying their presence by the presence of the other. But when it comes to, okay, what is your policy? What is your vision for the future? How are you going to reform the country? This is almost absent from the current discourse. So this is very problematic because once again, the past was united against the dictator and now is united against the other side. So it's a negative politics, it's not a positive politics. So we have to go beyond this, and this is where it's important to promote this understanding. Now, there is also something which is important in the Middle East is these are Muslim majority countries, and there is a very deep question, is in which way Islam as the religious or ethical reference is going to play a role in the society. In the second part of the book, I'm tackling this issue because it's a very deep question. You have seen that all the Islamic parties and the Islamists, but also the secularists, of course, they are not talking an Islamic state. They are talking about a civil state. With Islamic reference, some are advocating the fact that even in Tunisia, Rashid Ghannouchi is saying we don't have to put Sharia in the constitution. The Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt are saying the same. In Turkey, Erdogan, who was coming from the Islamist trend, is saying we deal with the secular system. We don't have a problem with the secular system. So they are moving. People are moving. Okay, that's fine. But it means also that with this, in which way are you going to use the Islamic ethical reference? This question is important because it's there, but it should be done without a dogmatic imposition of the religious reference. And this is not now settled. Why? Because what we see in all this country is now competitions between religious organizations. You have seen in Tunisia, in Egypt, in Yemen, now in Syria, now in Libya, and even in Morocco, the new presence in political terms of what we call the Salafi. The Salafi 10 years or 15 years ago, they were not involved in politics. They were thinking Islam is against democracy. And now they are within, and they are competing and destabilizing all these countries with the religious reference. So it means that here there is something to be solved. How are you going to deal? I don't know if you followed, sometimes it was just laughable to see how they are trying to get the attention of the people. By, for example, in the parliament, they had a discussion, and all of a sudden, one of the literalists, the Salafi, stood up and said, now it's time to call for prayer. And within the parliament, I said, look, the mosque is like outside. They were calling, why do you want to call? It's time to call, I call and hear. And it was about calling for prayer within the parliament, and just to show we are the religious reference and you are not. In fact, a competition as to the religious reference. And you know why it's very dangerous, this? Because we end up having in the Muslim majority countries today something which is very close to religious populism. Religious populism is to deal with the religion in a very populist way, dealing with emotions, trying to get the legitimacy of the religious reference against the other. And you can see the Salafi trying to deal with the religious reference against the Reformist or against the Muslim Brotherhood or against the Nahda or against different trends. This is a competition, and religion is used to make us or the other more credible in the whole discussion. There is nothing as dangerous as religious populism, because you are dealing not with emotions, but the relationship, and you know how religion could be passionate. Religions are teaching us spirituality, but many people are much more passionate than spiritual in the way they deal with the religious reference. So this is a big question here, and this is something that we have to solve in the Middle East if we want to promote something which has to do with more stability, and dealing with these tensions is going to be difficult. Add to this, one of the very, very deep problems that the Muslims are facing now is the big divide between Shia and Sunni. And Shia and Sunni, this is something, and look at it, it's what is happening in Syria is revealing what is happening between Iran, Lebanon, Syria, and who are, which are the more Shia countries, the Shia majority countries, versus the Sunni majority countries, and the support of the Sunni to the resistance in Syria. Very complex, very difficult. But these are questions that we need to tackle and to try to understand if we come to this. Now, if we go a step further in this discussion about the future, and we want to keep this hope and to try to be realistic in as to the challenges that we are facing, as I said, there is this challenge of the economic stability. How now you can deal with the economic stability? And we have to be serious about this. Don't make the discussion about human rights something which is political or something coming from the humanitarian side of the discussion that we have, philosophical question about human rights. If you are serious about human rights, you need to deal with economic stability. There is no human rights to be protected if there is no an economy that is giving, for example, to the poor the necessary to eat and to get an employment. Human rights today has to do with something which is which kind of economic model, which kind of economy are we going to promote? And when you deal with this, one of the great problems that these countries are facing is the lack of economic structure and the money. You know where the money is going. For example, when the United States is giving money to Egypt, mainly they are giving money to the army. The army is not only the security, 60% of the biggest economic sectors in Egypt. So we are talking about economy, we are talking about controlling the country. So if we want to promote, something which has to do with the rights of the people in the country, we need to tackle this in economic terms, and not only in political terms or by having a philosophical discussion about how we should deal with, the rights of the citizens. Because if you don't have stability in that way, it's not going to work. It means also that one of the main challenges dealing with economy, politics, and the social reality is corruption. Corruption is destroying everything. So once again, in a corrupt regime, as we have now, all these regimes are still corrupt and people are trying to reform them, but it's very difficult. Corruption is what is not helping to have anything which has to do with the democratization process and respecting the rights of the people. So corruption, it's important. The economic stability is a very important challenge. Add to this also something that we have to talk about if we are talking about democracy is the future role of the army in the system. Now I'm talking to you about what is happening in Egypt, and the upper hand in Egypt is not Morsi, is not the president. Behind the scene, the army. If the army decides tomorrow that it's over, it's over. It's over. In Egypt, they decide that the system is going to collapse. They can make it collapse tomorrow. They can change the whole thing. They are still very powerful. For the first time in the recent history, under a democratic process, the constitution is giving to the army the rights it never had before under Mubarak. Protected as to the money, as to the judiciary, and as to their role within the civil state, which is just unbelievable. And this was written, and there is this agreement between the political forces and the army, and among them the Muslim Brotherhood that are leading the country. We have to be serious about this. If we want to talk about hope, we have to look at the challenges. Now, let me come to the last 2 points that I wanted to make. When we want to promote this and say, okay, there is something which is happening, it's still positive. The challenges are huge. It's very difficult and complex. And this is why I'm here. I'm not coming here just to talk about the reality far from us. Any citizen who wants to work for human dignity and justice and liberate the countries and support democracies around the world, we should understand the complexities of all these dimensions, even here in the United States of America. Even here in the United States of America, if you deal with the human rights and democratic process, you know as American citizens that what is happening in your own system should be improved, that it's not perfect, that you have economic forces in this country deciding much more than you, because you think that you are electing your presidents. Fine, good for you. But to elect the president is not to decide about the system. It's not to decide. Your president that was so popular in this country, Bill Clinton, said when he was the president, the people who are running this country as 1%. Powerful and rich people and transnational corporations. Vote, that's good, but don't be naive. Don't be naive. So as much as you don't have to be naive with your own country and you have to improve what is happening here, we should understand that it's the same for others, and it's very difficult. Now, having said this, there are challenges that are missing in the discussion in the Middle East. And you talk to the people who are running the countries, for example, in Egypt, in Tunisia, and in every single country in the Middle East. What is important now is which type, which vision, which policies are you going to promote to act against poverty? And if we are serious about the democratic process, if poverty is huge, democracy is weak, if not absent in some situation. And this is the reality that we are dealing with in the countries, that Egypt and Tunisia, these are countries where poverty and misery and marginalization are, the destiny of so many people. And to add to this, the dimension of the educational system. You know how much it is important. There is something that cannot work. If you promote human rights, you should understand, my first right as a human being is to get education. Food first, and education second. Food is about poverty. And we know this from an Islamic perspective is something which is a very deep teaching coming from Islam. Be careful with poverty, because at one stage poverty could lead you to deny the very existence of God. الفقر قد يؤدي إلى الكفر. That poverty could lead people to deny the very existence of God. And to believe or not to believe, it's my right. But to get my right, I should have the necessary to eat in order to have my mind to choose. If I don't have the mind to choose and only I have my body to survive, there is something wrong in the whole system, which is against human rights. The first human right is this one. And the second is, beyond poverty, is to be educated. Look at the educational systems that we have in the Middle East. It's a catastrophe. The only country where it went better, it's in Tunisia, and now we still have the lowest level of women being educated in North African country. The women are the less educated in North African country as to the rates when you compare it to the other countries in the world. There is something here that we need to deal with, which is the vision about reforming the educational and put money in the educational system and not to put money in weapons and not to put money in security. These are the big questions. And this is where, for example, we also have to deal with what type of policies as when it comes to social justice. There is something which is missing in the whole thing. We don't hear these voices talking, what are the steps to get social justice? What we get there is discussion about, this polarization and not about the deep challenge. And sometimes us in the West, we fall into that trap. We do exactly or we repeat what is said. For example, when it comes to Islam and women, I said, yes, there is a big problem with women in Islam, and look at the societies. And we heard this in the media here. What we heard in the media is it's dangerous what is happening in the Muslim majority countries because more and more women are wearing the headscarf, meaning there is an Islamization of the society, and wearing the headscarf, it's backward. So we are regressing. Since when you can assess the level of liberation of a woman by the way she dresses? How can you say this? No. Don't clap. Think about it because it's a deep question, which is what is coming after this is deeper. We should assess empowerment and liberation for women on two criteria, two parameters. The first one is education and access to education. Second is access to the job market. When you have education and you can access the job market, this is where you are empowered. But you need to get this access. This is equal opportunities. What does it mean? Same skills, same salary. And this is good to remind all of us, even in the United States of America. When with the same skills, we still can have 20% less than a man. You don't know why? That's the rule, and that's wrong. That's something which is important in the Middle East. Don't assess the situation by the way women dress, but assess the situation on education for all and opportunities for all. And this is not the case today. So it's a deep question here, and this is where we deal with social justice. Let me end with one other challenge that I keep on repeating, and I think that very often we underestimate this dimension. My right as a human being, and if I go through the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, you can take the articles and you can say, okay, I don't have a problem with any of these articles as a Muslim. Don't have a problem. But you have to add to this things that are not in the articles, but they are very much part of something which is giving me a sense of dignity as a human being. And it's part of human rights. It's part of the future. When we speak about social justice, education, acting against corruption, promoting a civil state, all that is fine. And this is now what we hope could happen, but people should go beyond this polarization and tackle the true questions. But there is something that we are not talking about in all our discussions, and I want to end with this, is part of the human rights is, look at you. You are living here in the society. And when you go out, you have your traditions, you have your culture, you have your language, you have arts, you have imagination, and you have entertainment, And you have something which has to do with creativity, which is natural. We have a culture. And in fact, when you are within a culture and you are a human being, to celebrate the culture is something which is very important. You celebrate the culture through arts, imagination, and creativity. And it means what? What is the meaning of a culture when you say, I belong to this culture? In fact, it nurtures in you sense of belonging and well-being. And one of the main crises for the Arabs today is a very deep crisis in cultural terms. A problem with the language. The language. Speaking Arabic and celebrating the language. Celebrating something which is completely absent today. When you celebrate the fact that you are producing something in scientific terms, in artistic terms, that your culture is contributing to the cultures of the world. This is where you feel better. You go beyond this psychological tension. Today, what is happening in the Arab world is something which is a deep crisis. A lack of imagination, a lack of creativity, a lack of production in artistic terms and in scientific terms. In all these dimensions, it's as if we are here on the defensive. There is something which is a sense of deep alienation, where your language doesn't celebrate something, where your culture doesn't give something, don't contribute in scientific terms, within academia. It's as if we are on the margin. This is a very important thing, which is celebrating a language, celebrating culture. This is where we are expecting the governments to do something. And don't underestimate this. Because with the relationship with the West, if you keep on having this impression that you are under cultural colonizations, it means that you will never get this well-being. And what is happening in the great majority of the southern countries is the sense that we are under the Western culture domination. So instead of being, reactive, we need to celebrate into a way which is a cultural liberation, which is important for the future. Having said that, you can see it's complex as to the facts, it's challenging as to the future, but we have to look at it with something happened which is positive. There are obstacles, there are difficulties, but there is also hope, because the people and the young generation, they don't want to come back to dictatorships. What we can do, what you can do, and this is why it's important for us to talk about this here, is not to be passive. Just be consistent with your own values. Sitting in an evening to say, I'm a Democrat, I am promoting human rights, and I'm supporting the Democrats everywhere. This should mean that in the United States of America, with your own government, at the local level as well as the national level, you should be courageous citizens. And at least, to be consistent with your values means to ask your government to be consistent with our values. That the blood of an Arab is as valuable as the blood of an American. That the human dignity is equal for all, that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is saying that a black, a white, whoever we talk about, an Arab or whoever, we all have the same value. And to keep quiet when 100 Arabs are killed and to make a scandal because one American is killed is a scandal in itself. That couldn't be the future. No. It's not a call to clap. It's a call for a common responsibilization. We should be responsible. And this is the way we can help the southern people, by being consistent here with our own values. Never forget in our life that to celebrate human rights means to be politically and humanly consistent with our own values. Thank you.
we will have some Q&A time. So we'll have people holding the mics. What I ask is that you make your questions short, and after you've asked your question, please get the mic back to wherever you got the mic so that the mic can go on to the next person. So probably about 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A.
Okay, we can take one question from here and one question.
Assalamu alaikum. The question is, there is a point it was not clear for me from your lecture.
We can't hear.
Oh, sorry. The question is, the revolutions in the Arab states made by United States and Europe or got support from them? Who did the revolution, the people or United States and Europe?
Okay, quite quickly, because people who heard one day I gave a lecture, and this lecture was cut on internet, and it's as if it was all a conspiracy. No, my position on this is that there was, from the very beginning, and it started in 2003, a pushing and helping cyber dissidents to be trained. Who made the uprisings are people, and they took into the street, and they made it. And this is coming from the people. It was not under the control of the Americans and the Europeans. But this doesn't mean that they were not knowledgeable about it. They didn't know what was happening. They trained cyber dissidents, they pushed them to mobilize the people, and then the people made the revolution, and something which was not under control was the result, what was going to happen. This is not under control, it was not under control. And the best example is Syria. For 8 months, the American administration and the European administration were asking Bashar al-Assad, reform your regime from within. It's only after 8 months, when they saw the courage of the people in the streets, that decided to change their policy and to ask Bashar al-Assad to leave. So I think that we cannot say that, the big conspiracy, everything was under control. No. But to say that nothing was known, and this organization that trained the cyber dissidents were not in touch with the American, I think that this is wrong as well. And we have to be very cautious with this. And unfortunately, I'm saying this in the book, but what is happening now is just confirming what I was saying.
I have a question about the comparison of the Arab awakening and the situation that is happening in the Arab world. And how does that compare with Afghanistan and the Afghan people? Is there any hope for the Afghan people to be awakened, or is it just pessimistic and we have to wait a long time before that happens?
How would you like the Afghani people to be awakened?
First, education, of course, but for them to uprise against Hamid Karzai, Afghanistan is different than the Arab world in the sense that there's a lot of complexities with the culture and the oppression within the people themselves. But now that we have Western, invasion of Afghanistan, it has caused even more confusion and even more oppression of the Afghani people. So is it possible for the Afghani people to uprise not only against their own cultural oppression, but against the Western as well? Is there hope for that, or I'm not sure how they can uprise?
I'm not sure as well. I think that what you are saying is true, is the situation in Afghanistan for many reasons. First, for the structure of the society and the way it's, all the tribes and the clans and the way it works. It's not at all something which is a united country. And up to now, Karzai and his government is having authority in this very small part, very small area of the whole country. It's not covering the whole country. So it's it's a strategic control of what should be controlled to be able to deal with the West and to secure enough space to carry on all the, what has to do with the lithium, what has to do with oil, and all the trade that can be done now with his presence. That's true. Now, can you see people being able to change this? I think it's going to take a long time to mobilize the people to have a unity and a political project. And the recent years with all this, resisting the Russian presence and then having to deal with the Taliban and the American presence and the foreign presence, it's just now it's a country which is completely scattered. There is no unity behind the political vision. And in fact, once again in Afghanistan, it confirms what I was saying about Libya and what I was saying about Iraq. Completely scattered political system, security and small security for Karzai around Kabul and the whole country, and still the economy is working because what should be secured in economic terms, and as for the trade and the business, it's done and it's secured. So I don't see anything that could happen in the coming years.
All right, my question is, you talked about human rights, you talked about respecting each other, and you also talked about Iraq. Now, in recent times, there's been a persecution of leaders who have committed war crimes. Recently, we have Kenyatta, who's the president of Kenya, and we have the U.S. calling him to the International Tribunal because he's a wanted man. Now, considering the fact that Bush orchestrated and went into Iraq, would you be the first advocate to call for President Bush to the International Tribunal to be tried for war crimes?
You might know that I was banned from this country for 6 years under the Bush administration, and what I said is that to be banned from this country under the Bush administration is much more a honor than a dishonor under his administration. I think that facing history, someone like Bush and someone like Tony Blair, the country where I live, should be judged. Yes, there should be a trial. What they did and the way that they lied to the people. We are not it's not a joke. They went to the United Nations to tell us that they were a weapon of mass destruction. In Iraq, it meant 600,000 people being killed for economic reasons. And you can just go and try to get the African leaders and to say you have to go to the international court. Why is it that they have to go, and when it comes to what was done and decided on the lie, is not going to go through a trial? So I would be the first, yes.
My question is, what is the relationship between the Salafis and the Sunnis and the Shia in the context of secularists versus Islamists? And the second part of that question is, what is Salafi's relationship with the new players that you mentioned, South Africa, Brazil, China, Malaysia, and all the new players in the Middle East? Thank you.
And another what?
Oh, and what is the relationship between the Salafis in relationship to the new players that you mentioned,
okay.
the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, Malaysia, and the other countries that you mentioned?
First, we should understand that the Salafi, the literalists, are mainly Sunni, but not only. You can find them in the Shiite tradition, but it's rare. The great majority of the Salafi are Sunni. And in fact, it's one trend within the Sunni tradition which is advocating literalism. And they are literalists. we tend to call them, and this is wrong in scientific and in the normative terms, we can't call them Wahhabi as we call them. Very often we call them Wahhabi because we connect them to Saudi Arabia, but they don't call themselves Wahhabi, they call themselves Salafi, meaning in fact people coming to the scriptural sources. And there are two types of Salafi. You have the Salafi who are coming to the first to get the energy and the creativity. They are reformists. I'm from this lecture, I'm a reformist. I want to come back to the scriptural sources, but to renew the reading of the scriptural sources in the light of the new challenges. They don't do that. They come back to the scriptural sources and they read them literally. Now, these trends are very often supported by Saudi Arabia, but also the Qatari organizations are supporting them. So they play a destabilizing role in Tunisia, in Egypt, and their connection is mainly with Saudi Arabia. What is worrying is that these people, they are Islamists in a way. And they are Islamists because what they are saying, they are promoting a political Islam, even though they say they are not politicized. In fact, they are politicized. Someone who is telling you there is no democracy in Islam, there is no election in Islam, there is no, what is said about, women and the rights of women, even to vote. In some of the country, they cannot even vote, and now they are starting to vote at the local level. So this is what? If it's not politics, I don't understand what is politics. And they keep on repeating, and this is the way I respond to them, say, okay, no, we are not involved in politics. No, nothing, we have nothing to do with politics. They say, your way of saying that you have nothing to do with politics is politics. It's a political position where you are supporting the Saudi government by saying they have power, so we respect them. So what is worrying here is that behind the Saudi system, who is supporting the Saudi now? Who is supporting the Qatari? Who is supporting the governments that are supporting the literalists? It's the United States of America and the European countries, and the Chinese and the Russian. They are all dealing with Saudi Arabia. They are all dealing with petromonarchies because they have oil. So in fact, we are supporting people we are supporting governments that are supporting people whose rhetoric is against anything which has to do with democracy, open society, and pluralism. This is what it is. This is what the way it's very paradoxical. Now, with the new players, China or Russia or whatever, they will deal with them as long as the geostrategic interests are protected. So it's not to support, it's not to be against, is real politic. Real politic is we deal with them, and this is what is happening.
Yes, in regards to the Shia and Sunni, it's been a situation which has deep-seated animosity over the centuries, and I feel that it's something that's been easily exploited by certain factions. And do you feel that that is something that is being exploited by factions within the world, particularly in the West and Zionism? And what would be the solution among the Muslim world to solve that?
That's a good and important question. There were tensions, and there has been tension for years and decades, but the new type of tensions started in recent history with the conflict between Iran and Iraq. Remember when Iraq, by the way, at that time, Saddam Hussein was good. Saddam Hussein was the very good friend of Rumsfeld. We have pictures, and they were visiting, and they were pushing them against Iran. It started in the contemporary context there, and then it was exploited in Iraq. Now what we have is clans and tribes and segregations and conflicts between Shia and Sunni, and this was instrumentalized by the Americans, and we know this, the Americans and the British, because they know exactly where there is a fragile reality between the Sunni and the Shia. At the regional level now, as I said, Syria with the conflict, for the first time in my life, on my website, I received so many insults by people who think that if I'm against Bashar al-Assad, it's because I'm a Sunni and I'm supporting the resistance. And for them now, Bashar al-Assad is supported by Iran, it's supported by some trends in Lebanon, and it's now explained through the Sunni-Shia divide. And this is very dangerous. To explain, for example, that I would be against the Bahrain regime, even though they are Sunni and they are torturing and repressing the Shia, which is not acceptable. And to be against Bashar al-Assad is a question of principle. It's not a question of tradition. Bashar al-Assad is a tyrant. He's a dictator. And my position of principle, whoever is a tyrant, we should get rid of him and we should remove him from the government. What could happen now, what is happening now, it's a very, very big and very dangerous divide and very, very difficult tensions. It's so much the case that I come here in this country. I was in Canada and I came here in the States, and I have been here for the last, in 2 or 3 cities we have this discussion, and the divide, even here in the United States of America, is becoming a reality which is very tense in the way we analyze what is happening in the Middle East. So there are 3 things to do. First is to take a position of principle. And the position of principle is from the Sunni side and the Shia side is to say Sunni and Shia are Muslims. That we cannot acknowledge or accept what is said by some Salafi by putting the Shia outside Islam and saying these people could be attacked and they are no longer Muslim. The second is to take a position of principle. It's to be principled in our position and not following, the affiliation as Sunni or as Shia. And the third is really to work on dialogue and working together. But maybe we start at the periphery to come to the center. At the periphery means here. We need these voices to come together, Sunni and Shia, to come with a new analysis of the situation. Myself, I have a center in Qatar where I'm working on Islamic ethics and legislation, but I'm also trying to deal with the reformist Iranian in the Press TV, where I'm having a program with the reformist by being involved as a Sunni scholar with Shia to say, I'm not going to cut the links between us, because if we do this, it's very dangerous. But it is a very, very deep problem that we are facing now, and the Muslims are not involved enough in changing this.
Last question.
Okay, I have it here.
Why is the last?
Do you see any prospects for an American awakening?
I can't see you. Say it again.
Do you see any prospects for an American awakening?
What is happening here? What do you want me to say? You want me to call for an American revolution? Look, one of my friends who passed away recently, you heard him, I don't know if you heard about Stéphane Hessel. Stéphane Hessel is the one who wrote this 18 pages, a very short manifesto, and it's in French. He called it Indignez-vous. It's the whole movement in Madrid. And then in Greece, they were in the street, they were quoting him. He passed away, he was 95, I think, or 94. And he was calling the people to resist. He was calling the people to say, no, enough, it's enough. So stand up for this. And I think that with our crisis and what we went through in many countries, there is a sense of an awakening that it cannot work like this. Now, some people, you have two theories about what could happen in the States. You have people saying it's not going to last long, it's the end for the American society. We are witnessing the last years of this hyper power, this hegemony, and we still have to just have to wait and others will take over. So this is one of the theories that we have, where it's saying China is coming, India is coming, and there is this shift towards the east. The second is to look at the situation within the society and to hope that beyond the lack of ideology and populism that is now becoming something which is a reality in the States, this ideology based on the other, the war on terror, stigmatizing and having a structural racism that we are not solving, that we might be happy because the first African-American president was elected, and we take the symbol and we forget the reality because many African-Americans are still dealing with injustices, discrimination, and structural racism on the job market when it comes to the judiciary and all this. I think that with all this reality, what we can hope is to see the young people being aware of this. But there is a vicious circle here. By hoping for an American awakening, we should hope for a very deep crisis that is pushing the people to wake up. So to call for this could be, a vicious circle. You want what is bad to open the eyes and to help the people to stand up. I would say that what I saw in some cities, in some gatherings in the United States is an understanding that something should be done in this country. So I don't know. I don't think that the American awakening could come very soon. But I would hope that we can find American citizens now understanding that if we don't deal with the serious issues in this country, this power that we have and sometimes this arrogance will come back to you in a very bad way. So we better learn humility and start working for the good of all the people. And it starts in the United States. Thank you.
There is one more question here.
One last question. I have to go quickly? Okay.
I'll try to be quick.
Me too.
I saw the Arab Spring very intimately. I lived in Cairo for 2 years and was there when everything happened. And I was teaching at a private school, very elite school, where most of my students, this is getting to your point about the crisis of creativity. And so my students, I noticed, would almost never read in Arabic. They never had a paperback book. When I started to ask them why don't you read in Arabic, they said, Miss, we would never even consider reading in Arabic. It's boring. We don't understand the classical form of the language. And what we speak, the common logat fil shara, the ameya, the street, I don't know what you would call it. What do you call it?
The dialect.
The dialect, yeah.
Egyptian dialect.
It's completely different than what is in our books. And so this whole thing that you're bringing up about then everything sort of, how should I put it? Creative ideas being created through a Western sieve, if you will, is really a crisis. And I don't necessarily blame the West as much as I do the educational systems in the Arabic world that kept, because of the religion and because of the connection to the Quran, when Taha Hussein tried to make a reform and tried to, change Arabic so that people could actually use it in, bookstores are about, half the size of the stage, people are not reading in the Arab world. And I think that is the biggest crisis or a starting point. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on, reforming the Arabic language so that people could really use it instead of what the kids are using now is A, B, C, D. You know, they're using the English alphabet and replacing certain letters with 3s and 5s and 7s. I don't know if anybody understands. It's a new language that's evolving. Okay, so I just wanted to, right.
Yes.
Your opinion on that.
You know, it's, you know, when you look at the people, what they are saying when it comes to English or French or Western languages, in the new language of, you know, these short messages and Twitter, and say we might have to think about reforming the spelling, and we don't. We should not do this. So I wouldn't say that in the Arab world we should change the language. The problem is not this. Why they have a problem with the language is not because the language is difficult. It's because the whole educational system and the way we deal with the language is not giving value. You educate someone when what he is or she is getting as, you know, means and education is connected to having a value within the society. Today, this crisis towards, you know, the American or the English or the other languages is based on self-depreciation. That we have nothing to give. You speak Arabic and who cares? Who is going to celebrate? You know, you don't have a value. To educate is to give the means for you to be autonomous and to get a value within the society. If the society is not celebrating, you know, because you know the Arabic language. When you know the Arabic language, it's poetry, it's literature, it's something which has to do with the beauties, has to do with your own self. Is now they don't care about this is because all what is said about it is depreciating the whole process, and we have to change this. So I wouldn't say go for, you know, less Arabic and simplify the language. I think that upstream we should come with a very deep understanding of how do you celebrate the language? How do you make the jobs? How do you make the society being able to deal with this language? You know, there is an Algerian thinker who said something which is very important. He said, and this is your point when you say, I don't blame the West, I blame what is happening in the society. I'm just coming back from Senegal, and I was before that in Mali. I say, look, stop blaming the West for everything. The first responsible of the state of affairs is you. You know, and even, for example, in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, when the people are telling me, oh, you know what, we have to blame the West. Of course, the blame could be, the West could be blamed for passivity or unilateral support. But at the end, the first not to support the Palestinians are the Arabs themselves. It's coming from there. The problem is coming from the societies there. So Malik Ben-Abi was saying, we have been colonized because we were colonizable. And the Arabs today are alienated because they were and they are alienable. So the point is this, how do we resist? It's not by changing the structure of the language. Is to give back the value of language and culture. And this has to do with creativity, literature, and imagination. Celebrating this is essential. Thank you.
I want to remind you, there's a reception just outside of the library. Professor Ramadan will be speaking tomorrow at noon at the Gould. He is coming from a different time zone, so he can't stay long, but there will be book signing out here as well. So I think that does it. And thank you for coming, and thank you one more time to Professor Ramadan.